This evening we're in Vayishleh. I'm in Vayishev, and Vayishev is Genesis, the 37th chapter, and it is going to run through chapter 40, 37 to 40. Very familiar story, the story of Yaakov and Joseph. His love for Joseph, the difficulties that Joseph experienced, and what I would like to do, and this story is a very familiar story with just about everybody that reads the Bible. This is like to even probably in Christianity, and I'm not sure about Islam. The story of Joseph is a very familiar story. What I would like to do in this year is to talk about the subject matter, how to have calm in calamity. And it's a principle of Joseph. It's a Joseph principle. And we see it very clearly. The sages of blessed memory say that that the patriarchs are a signpost for our decisions, how we operate our life. They're sort of like waypoints. You look at their life, you can say, you see how they dealt with those things. And if it's interesting, one of the proofs that we see that the Torah is very unique, that the Tanakh is very unique, is that they don't attempt to candy coat anything about the great sages, the great patriarchs. They give the good, bad, and the ugly. But we see a theme that follows through each one of the patriarchs as well as their descendants. It's amongst the calamity and difficulty that they experience, it seems that it just works out. And what is that? What is the whole idea? I wrote this phrase down, and I want you to understand the phrase within the context of Jewish thought alone. Purpose brings you to your destiny, but your destiny is determined by God. Purpose brings you to your destiny, but your destiny is determined by God. Now, what prompted this thought is a comment that the Rebbe made when he was arrested in Russia. The Russian policeman threatened him with his pistol that he would kill him. And the Rebbe answered him and said, only those who have many gods and one world will be frightened by that type of a statement. And a person who has one God and two worlds is not frightened at all. So what is this idea? Is that a person who understands that they live constantly in physicality as well as a level of spirituality, that the life situations that would tend to threaten other people and cause that calamity to assault them psychologically and spiritually won't do that to that person because they are very aware that there are two worlds. There is the world to come, and then there is the permanent world of physicality. And when you look at Joseph's life, as sort of messed up as it seemed to be honest with you, when we read in the first part of the text, it talks about how Jacob dwelled in the land there, his father, and dwelled in the land of Canaan, and there were generations of Yaakov. And Joseph, at the age of 17, was pasturing the flocks with his brothers. He was as youth growing up with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. His father's wives. Joseph brought evil reports about them to his father. So we already see right off the beginning, Joseph is this 17-year-old kid that there was something sort of grinding in his relationship with his brothers. According to this ancient text, we're going to discover comments from two particular sages that addresses this issue as to why would Yaakov send Joseph to his brothers when they were out in the field knowing that the relationship was strained. Isn't that a bit odd? Why would he do this knowing that his brothers despised Joseph so much? Proverbs 16:9 says, a person plans his course, but God directs his steps. A person plans his course, God directs the steps. And then there is this simple message from Micah, the 6th chapter, verse 8. in which we truly begin to understand this concept of purpose. Because if we don't know what is your purpose, then people are going to be wandering around life trying to find their purpose fruitlessly and not actually ending up at their destiny. Does that make sense? If we're going to build on this idea of purpose leads you to destiny, and destiny is determined by God. Meaning that if I know my purpose, then clearly the steps that I plan out, what I try to work on, God will make sure, as long as I stay focused on my purpose, He'll make sure that my destiny is according to His plans, right? So Micah 6:8 says this, He has told you, O man, what is good and what the Lord really wants from you. He wants you to promote justice, to be faithful, and live obedient before your God. Very simple, huh? It's not about beauty products, even though we want to be beautiful people. It's not about the latest deodorant or the kind of car you drive. It's not about the latest gadgets that you have. It's about one thing, loving justice, doing good. That's what God expects. And you go, wow, that doesn't sound like a really big purpose in the world. Is that all God expects of me? Yes. Especially as Americans, we get so caught up in material things that we totally lose focus that what God expects from us is not that complicated. And people lose focus of their purpose because they are living in one world, thinking they're in two. And so as we read this, we see right off the bat that the dynamics between Joseph and his brothers and Yaakov is very, very tense. Why? Well, the brothers feel jealous that Yaakov is so endeared to Joseph. He loves Joseph. And maybe it was because Yaakov sort of picked up that because he was sort of saw this whole idea of favoritism in his household, and he just sort of picked up when it was a natural thing. But you and I both see that this is a dysfunction. Okay, so we can talk about how wonderful, what a great tzaddik Yaakov was, but this is a dysfunctional idea. Any practical human being on this earth would know to show direct favoritism to a child against the other ones is going to hurt the relationship. It's going to do nothing to promote goodness in the relationship. With that being said, we have to look at this idea that there was provocation. Joseph, maybe it's because he knew he was the favored son, had the almost blessing to provoke his brothers. And then the dream comes along, and he tells them about the dream. And basically the interpretation of the dream is that they'll one day bow down to him. And it wasn't just one dream, there were two dreams here. Not only that, they would bow down to him, but his mother and father would bow down to him. It's pretty wild and crazy idea. This drove them insane. Now, it seems that Yaakov ends up at some point realizing this is not tenable. It's not going to work. And he even asked him, why'd you even bring this up? You see him in the text slightly chide Joseph for his bringing up of the dream, even saying, so you're even saying that we will bow down to you, right? You see him hear that going on. Commentators express surprise at Jacob for sending Joseph, as I said, and also Joseph for agreeing with him. Joseph knew how difficultly strained his relationship was with his brothers. Therefore, the sages of blessed memory and commentators try to look at the finer points of the text to try to find out what is the source. Why would Yaakov send Joseph into such a difficult situation? At one level, you could say Yaakov and Joseph knew what the plain text does not say. And that was, namely, Joseph's trip might right the relationship between Joseph and his brothers. Now, here's the concept. Yaakov tells to Joseph, go and see. Go and see. And within the text, something is said that is not written in the open, which is often the case of Torah text. The term go and see could be translated to see with your intelligence. see and set all things right. This idea, go find your brothers and get this stuff resolved. Joseph, out of honor of his father, says, I'll go do it. Now, there is also this idea, according to Rashbam and Sforno, Vadia Sforno says, Joseph had high regard for the commandments that says to honor your parents, and therefore any sense of danger that he would have had, he just overlooked it. This is what my father wants me to do. I'm going to go find my brothers and check on them. Rashbam also adds in the name of one Yosef Karar, that the object of the mission was precisely to see how the brothers were faring in Shechem. Now notice, where did we see Shechem before this? Do you remember Dinah? Dinah went out and she was captured. What did Reuben and Gad do? They slaughtered the whole group of people. Now, if you're going to be sheep herders some years later, why would you go back to a place that your name is not well respected? That's the reason why Joseph, at one case, or Yaakov, is very concerned for the sons. It wasn't the case of go spy on your brothers and come back and give me a spy report. It was the fact that his brothers were in Shechem, and knowing the dangers of his sons being there, he wants his younger son to go see and check on him. That's one possible scenario that's laid out. Once Joseph had heard his brothers had moved from Shechem and had taken the sheep to pasture elsewhere, his mission was completed. He could have just returned and said, hey, Dad, they're not in Shechem anymore. They're gone. They're somewhere else. Why didn't he do that? He continues on. However, he took his father's command further, continued to seek his brother. The reason why that Sforno and Rashbam say that they believe very seriously that the goal of Joseph was to go rectify his relationship with his brothers from this term, go and see, is that when clearly he went and saw that they weren't there, he could have reported that. But he didn't. He carried on. How did he carry on? There is a divine decree that takes place. Who is the man that he bumps into but this stranger? Obviously, Yaakov is lost. Doesn't know where he's going. And he bumps into says a man appeared. Now, the sages of blessed memory say that this man was not just a man, that it was a servant of Hashem and possibly Gabriel that pointed him in the right direction. Then you would go, that's it. Why would God send an angel to tell Joseph to go in harm's way when clearly Hashem knows everything? Well, don't we see in this whole calamity, this place of calamity that's getting ready to take place, there is a plan that is being laid out. That the divine plan is in action. And that Yaakov and Joseph are planning their steps. They're working on their steps. And the brothers have worked on their steps. They already have this deceit in their heart. Joseph has this mission to go rectify things. We're seeing sort of the clash of titans getting ready to take place. And right in the middle of all of this, you have God, you have Hashem working out a plan that's precise and perfect. Because we know that the prophecy that was given to Abraham, God told him that your people, as a sign that he would do all these great things, that your people would be in a land that was not their own and they'd be in captivity. This prophecy is going to take place. There's another group of commentators that explain the story as a divine plan to realize the promises made in the covenant of pieces, as I just mentioned. Thus, the example, Maimonides, son of Rabbi Abraham, explains that in his opinion, the Holy One, blessed be He, blocked Jacob's premonitions and hid from him the result of the action in order to bring in the process of descent into Egypt. It says here in the commentary on the Torah by Rav Abraham in 1958, it says this on page 183, it says, Yaakov was not cognizant of this divine secret. He threw caution to the wind in letting Joseph off by himself to his brothers, go off by himself to his brothers, whose hearts were filled with hatred. This happened in order to carry out his will that they, Jacob and his sons, descend to Egypt. So here's the debate. Do bad things happen to righteous people? Is it always related directly to punishment? No. Now one can say all punishment is directed by God. That means that when you are punished for something you've done wrong because of a sin, you expect that God gives you that punishment. It doesn't come from somebody else, it comes from God. Even though it might be through the hand of some other thing in physicality, the punishment comes from God. But the idea here is that it seems that God blocked this young man's ability to reason that his brothers could kill him. Maybe he was just too young and innocent. I was asked about my disposition on this subject from a dear rabbi, and I said, I told them this little anecdote that said that when I had the heart attacks and they were, putting me in the cath lab and cutting my clothes off and giving me morphine, I talked to Hashem for a second and I said, "You have a good sense of humor, right?" And I said, "Okay, if this is how you want to take me, go for it." And when I said that, the nurse says, "Are you feeling anxiety?" Right? Because she thought I was going through anxiety. I said, "No, I'm just praying." And so my attitude was, what's the worst can happen to me? Right? You die. That's really not the worst for a person who's connected to two worlds, right? And I realized at that moment God wasn't going to let me off that easy, especially when I woke up and was like, wow, okay, I guess you're not letting me off that easy. So this rabbi said, so is that really highly refined emunah? I said, no, I think it might be ignorant bliss. Right? Maybe I just don't know enough about my situation at the time that maybe I demonstrated some high level of emunah or faith. But the truth is this. A true believer in Hashem should have this same kind of disposition of calmness when you can trust the Creator of the universe to do His job. Because ultimately, when we go through calamity, and you know that you have lived according to your purpose. What is your purpose? To do justice and to serve God. Joseph was doing justice by obeying his father to go see his brothers to make things all right. But before he could get in that environment, what happened? Oh, here's the dreamer, right? Before he could accomplish that task, all of a sudden his life turned upside down. But it still didn't divert him from keeping his purpose. What was his purpose? To do justice and do good. He gets in Potiphar's house, and there Potiphar's wife falls in lustful passion for this strapping 17-year-old boy, and she attempts to seduce him. What is his response to her? I could never shame my father. I can never shame my father. That still sense of justice and a focus on the commandments of Hashem and the commandment to serve his father and to make sure that he does things right, he run the risk of being actually killed. But he wasn't. He was thrown in prison. There, while he was in prison, Yaakov goes to the wine taster and the bread maker, and he comes to them and says, "Why the long face?" Now think about this. Here, Joseph is practicing pastoral skills in jail. He's asking them, why you have such a long face? Now, this is a guy who is intent on doing that which is right in the midst of the most difficult time. I don't know if you have ever seen jails in that part of the country, but they're holes in the ground. They're not like, it's not 3 hots and a cot, okay? You're lucky if you have a rock to put your head on. And here it seems that he is it seems as if he's blissfully ignorant of his surroundings. No, that's not the case. What is the case? And Joseph knew, regardless of what my dreams are, what Hashem shows me, that outcome, that inevitable outcome, is determined by the Creator on the Creator's time. And how do we know that he knows this? This is his philosophy. This is his, what's the word for it? Prime directive. You remember when Joseph's father died, and the brothers come to him and say, just want to set things straight. You're not going to kill us now that the old man's dead, right? And he goes, hold on, look, how could I? Everything has come about for this one reason, so I could save my people. That's why this came about. It's not your fault. He totally let his brothers off the hook. Why did he say, no, you and I could both say, no, it was clearly the brother's fault. And there's sometimes you could look at your difficulties, your own calamity, and go, it's my fault. I am in this situation because of me. And you could surely develop the attitude, as I've said before, I don't deserve this because I didn't do this. I didn't make this happen in my life. But if we believe that the Creator of the universe is the one who makes the final decision of how my steps go or the direction I go, my path, my journey, then I have to say, I did deserve this. Because the Creator is working something very beautiful in my life, even in the midst of calamity. If you want to know what Joseph's principle, the Joseph principle is that in the darkest times of being in prison, whether he's being kidnapped by his brothers and then sold into slavery, breaking his poor father's heart, seeing all of this stuff take place, he still remained a trusted, loyal servant. Nothing was keeping him from escaping. He just maintained purpose and direction in his life. Joseph is in prison. He asks his two buddies after they get out, hey, remember me when you get out? Make sure you go to the king, let him know I'm here. He spends 2 more years in prison. Now, at this point, anybody would have been bitter, angry, and frustrated. Is this a guy that injustice has taken place in his life? Absolutely. But this is not a guy who thinks he's owed anything. Interesting perspective. You see, a person who's focused on his purpose is so focused on doing what God has asked them to do that the material world around them, it's immaterial what's going on in the material world around them. I've never seen, let me say this a little better. It is rare to find a person who is a very giving person full of loving kindness, who's always in the act of helping another person. It's hard to find a person like that very depressed. They just don't have time to be thinking about their own problems. Usually that person who's always thinking about somebody else is the last person that you ever hear them say, I'm so angry the world's not going my way. It's just they're so busy being concerned about other people's problems, they just don't have time to worry about their own. This is part of the Joseph principle. Because he was focused on serving God and doing good and doing justice in the world, he said, okay, prison's my lot right now. So I must do the very best I can in this circumstance to show justice, to show favor, and to show loving kindness. And then when he's out and he goes before Pharaoh, having the opportunity to oppress people, he doesn't oppress people. He ends up saving the Egyptians, the Egyptian nation, and building the coffers of the Egyptians, which later was taken by the Israelites when they left. But this principle worked for Joseph. Maimonides takes the same approach in this commentary that we were talking about, the divine purpose being, not the divine purpose, but the divine secret about what was getting ready to happen. And he says, namely, that the object of the story is to show how the divine decree came to pass. Joseph's determination, what is the divine decree? The divine decree is actually the decree that God was going to bring them into Egypt. Joseph's determination to visit his brothers, as father bade him, in the end worked to his determined. However, Joseph personally, according to Maimonides, was such that he was able not to fulfill his father's command despite all the warning and warning signs. He was not one to be lazy or to try to get out of fulfilling a mission, even though he no longer had any obligation, meaning that he continued on after the angel gave him instructions on where to go. This instructions by God is making sure that Joseph gets to his place, making sure that Joseph ends up in captivity. And that seems cruel. Why would the Creator do that? You see, now look, there are no good odds if you're not living your purpose that God put you on this earth. If you are not living the purpose God put you on this earth, there's really not any good odds I can tell you that your life's going to work out very nice. Okay, good, bad, or indifferent. But if you are living your purpose, then when calamity comes in your life, you're going to know it has only one design. And that is to bring about some high level of divine purpose in my life. And interestingly enough, it may not have anything to do with you personally. It might have something to do with someone else around you. It might have something to do with the next generation of children, your grandchildren. Something could happen to you that's like a butterfly effect that brings out some great essence. We look at the patriarchs and we say, wow, they didn't have life very easy. And just about any one of you in this room, if we could chronicle your life, the details of your life, you could tell some pretty horrid stories. Some may be greater in horror. Some people have been abused, sexually abused, raped. All kinds of horrible things have taken place in your life, and yet you've maintained your directive. You've maintained your focus. And though we've had times of imperfection, ultimately you've come to a good place. And now you're saying, wow, I get it now. Now I can look back. We say hindsight's 20/20, right? We can look back and go, no, I'm here because of all of those things that have taken place in my life. That Joseph principle is the thing, whether you are aware of it or not, that's what many of you have been working on. I want to conclude with the interpretation of the Zohar, essentially summing up the story from various angles, and to sort of take a higher look at this. The Zohar stresses several main points, namely that all that took place and happened by the way of divine providence in order to fulfill the covenant of pieces in the best and most convenient way for the children of Israel. 2, the integrity of the brothers. And 3, Joseph is not presented as perfect, but rather he is presented as a person that has weaknesses himself. So let me just say this. We know that you don't have to be perfect to fulfill your destiny. You just have to be focused on your purpose. So it reads this way in the Zohar on page 884 of Genesis. It says, man came upon him. What does it say above? Israel said, Joseph, your brothers are pasturing in Shechem. Come, I will send you to them. Why did the perfect Yaakov love Joseph most of all of his sons and knew that all of his brothers hated him, sent him in instead? Rather, he does not suspect them, knowing that they were all righteous, so that he did not suspect them. The Holy One, blessed be He, caused this all to happen in order to fulfill the decree. He was made in the covenant of pieces. I found in the works of the early rabbis that Jacob's sons had to reign over Joseph before going down to Egypt. For had he gone down to Egypt without their first ruling over him, the Egyptians might have reigned over the Israelites forever, and they would have not been able to leave. Therefore, it was wrought that Joseph be sold into slavery by his brothers. This is according to the Zohar. And that they rule over him, even though Joseph subsequently became a regent, and the Egyptians, his slaves, turns out that Israel ruled over all. And we pondered the words, a man came upon him, and this being the fact that Gabriel came and intervened or interdicted into this moment to bring about the divine decree. In closing, let's say this. If we visit the idea that the decisions I make in my life are so important to the ultimate outcome, we don't have to know what the ultimate outcome is going to be. We don't have to know our destiny, because that's purely in the hands of the Creator. What we have to focus on is what we're doing right now to show justice and to do good. That's all. It's pretty simple in life. I remember spending most of my young life trying to find my purpose, right? Well, what's my purpose in my life? The purpose is not whether you're going to be a lawyer or a doctor. The purpose is not going to be whether you're going to be an entrepreneur or you're going to work for industry. Your purpose is to do what God says. Very simple thing. Now, that is not a hard concept to follow. If you can do that, then God will make sure that your destiny is delivered into the right place. That concludes this shiur, and we will go to the lecture. We will go to question and answers.